Greetings, YouTube. I had someone contact me recently, I think it might have been last month, and asked me what I thought about the differences between a railroad-style role-playing campaign and a sandbox-style campaign. Now, first, some definitions, at least how I see them. For me, railroad campaign styles are a series of encounters within an adventure or a series of adventures in with a campaign where the PCs don't really have many choices. Even if they think they have choices, they don't. And a sandbox is an open world concept. That phrase is used frequently for certain types of computer role-playing games as well, where you are presented with an entire world to play in and you're allowed to go everywhere and pretty much do anything. So, which do I prefer? Well, I used to sketch quite a bit. I haven't sketched in a dog's age. But when I did, if you handed me a blank piece of paper, I would just stare at it. I would very likely never be able to sketch anything. I sketched on graph paper. I needed the structure. I needed the visual clutter, if you will, to get my mind moving, to give my mind permission to actually get on with the sketch. Much as if you ever want to set up a list for people to sign up on, at, say, a convention or at an information table, never leave a blank list. You seed the list with a name, you use your own, and then the next person will come along and add their list to a mailing list or something. But if you leave that mailing list blank, people hesitate to be the first person in. So, I guess I find a middle point between the two concepts. I don't think you can actually have a true sandbox game. If you were really and truly to present a group with the concept, you can go anywhere and you can do anything. I think the group would collectively stare at you and go, and you wouldn't get much done. And I think as a GM, since you cannot be omnipotent and omniscient, you have to have some structure prepared, which means in some ways there's going to be things laid down in the world that the player characters are going to interact with, whether they know it or not. Some things are simple. For example, if you have set up an encounter in town A and the players decide we're going to go to town B, then you just move the encounter to town B. Now, they didn't know. They can't know that the encounter had been originally planned for Town A. It's now in Town B. That's all they know. Their knowledge is incomplete and will always be incomplete. That is the nature of humanity. So, I question whether a true railroad situation is always bad. But things can be surprising. I think the key is a GM that is willing to adapt to the dynamic nature of what the player characters do to their world. If you have an incredibly railroad-like structure in your campaign, and yet your player characters make choices that you hadn't planned for, and you can adapt to those changes, you're a good GM. Look at the Munchausen challenge that's been going on for the past month or so. Okay, it's a great example of how can people improv situations thrown at them. Now, if you are a GM and you have set up some predetermined encounters and your player characters decide to go left instead of right and you are frozen, you can't adapt. You cannot be dynamic. You cannot get the adventure moving again because it's gone in a direction that you didn't have notes for. You're reading the box text off a module. That's a sign that you maybe need to practice some more, that you may need to flex your game mastering muscles a bit and be prepared to go off into the uncharted territory, to take the road less traveled. So I don't necessarily think that a railroad style structure is bad, so long as the GM is willing to adapt to it, is willing to roll with the punches. And a completely open world to me is directionless, is flavorless, it can't exist, because if a GM spent the time to create a world, he has laid things down for them. He has created a script for them to work within. Even if it's a broad one, even if it's accepting of their actions, if they go into many different directions, there still is a structure for them to work within. Without that structure, you have nothing. You can't play without structure. So to me, There is no such thing as a true sandbox environment. There has to be structure there. And it doesn't have to be a true trap in a railroad concept if the GM is willing to adapt to what the players throw at them. Because the GM could plan everything. You can think of every conceivable possibility. You could spend months working on an adventure, and I guarantee that your players are going to do something that you never thought of. Ever. And that's just the nature of people. They are always going to do things that make no sense. And then later, when it's all over, and you do the after-action report, you can look up at them and say, why did you do that? They may not have an answer. It may be a perfectly valid in-campaign answer. It may be a perfect valid answer for them as people in the situation you presented them with, or they really can't tell you why they did it. And it doesn't matter as long as everybody has fun. So I'm asking my viewers, where on this spectrum do you fall? Do you believe that railroad campaigns are all bad? Do you believe that sandbox campaigns are the holy grail? Do you find sandbox campaigns flavorless and railroad campaigns very much what you see in the films and the books that you love? So tell me, which do you like?